Hey team, happy Monday. Let's go ahead and dive in directly with a little bit of batch feedback. I was taking a look at your quiz results and your independent practice results last week, and I wanted to just review one thing that's really, really tricky and easy to mix up, and it has to do with plotting on a coordinate plane. So go ahead right now, make sure you have your notes. Go ahead and set up the beginning of your notes, please. Today we're going to be working on lesson 13, which is interpreting or saying what points mean on a coordinate plane. So that means we're going to get some story problems. We're going to have units on our x and y axes today. And before we can do that successfully, we've got to make sure we can plot points correctly. And it has been really tricky to practice over online learning. So I just want to do a quick review with you today. Okay, go ahead and write this reminder down. I want to give you this reminder first things first. As a reminder, an ordered pair is in the form x, y, and it tells us location. It tells us location. So the x represents an x value. So if I think about that horizontal number line, that's my x-axis. I want to know, where does it fall along that axis? Okay. And y is the y coordinate, or the y value of that location. So I'm looking at the vertical number line and I'm thinking, where does it fall on that axis? And when I put those two values together, I get a location that can represent a point. Okay. One important thing to note is that the x value always comes first. It always comes. Yeah. And so when I'm plotting points, I'm thinking that the first number listed is where it falls on that x-axis. Okay. Go ahead and draw a coordinate grid for me. It doesn't need to be perfect. We're going to plot a few points in here in some of the trickier quadrants. You've been plotting points just in this first quadrant where the x and y value are both positive since elementary school. But now we've got these other quadrants where one or both of the values are negative. Okay. What I want to review is some things that had us tricked on our independent practice last week on Thursday. So the first thing I want to do together is to plot this point, -3, 1. When I'm seeing that ordered pair, I know that an ordered pair is in this order, x value, y value. I'm going to go ahead and just write down a little x and y above my ordered pair. This location, this ordered pair tells me the location is at -3 on the x-axis and +1 on the y-axis. So I'm going to start with the x. I start my pencil at the origin. I'm just going to slide on over 1, 2, 3. This is where -3 is. But the point is not here. I also need a +1 on my y-axis, so I'm going up. Why am I going up, not down? I'm going up because this y value here is a +1. So I've got to go in the positives, and we know above 0 on the number line is positive, and below 0 on a vertical number line is negative. So go ahead and plot that point, and please label it with its ordered pair. This is -3, +1. Okay, a common mistake is accidentally to do -3 on the y-axis and a +1 on the x-axis. So I want to get at that misconception and practice a little bit. Can you please plot this point? Last 10 seconds. Go ahead and label it with an ordered pair. Awesome. The common mistake I was telling you about is to switch and actually think that this means -3 on the x-axis and +1 on the y-axis. It is not this same point. It is a different location. So what I've got to think about is that the first value, 1, comes on my x-axis. Here's a +1 on my x-axis. Why did I move to the right? I moved to the right because the x value is positive. And then -3, should I go up or down? Down, because it's a negative value. So down 1, 2, 3 spaces. Here is the point. Go ahead and label it with its ordered pair. If you need to pause the video to fix your work, if you made a mistake, go ahead and do that now. So this is all the way down in quadrant 4. All right, 2 more. Go ahead and plot these 2 points on your own, and then we'll come back together to review. 15 seconds left. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start to review. If you need a little extra time, please pause. The point -1, -3, I've got a -1 x value here and a -3 y value. 1, 2, 3. There is the point -1, -3. A common mistake here, guess what, is to accidentally swap them and go -3 on the x-axis and -1 on the y-axis. Okay. This is actually the point, -3, -1. So notice that the order that my ordered pair is listed in matters a lot for the location of my point. When you see questions on your quiz, when you see questions on your SATs, when you get to the point of applying for college, they are always going to put this tricky misconception on there for you. They're going to say, which one shows this ordered pair? It's like that because lots of people get it mixed up, but I know you guys are going to crush it because you know the x value comes first, and that x-axis is my horizontal number line. Okay. Awesome. So hopefully that was a good review. We're going to dive into our lesson today, which is on interpreting points in a coordinate plane. And we're going to think about first time and temperature. Okay. All right, so we're just going to answer question 1 first together. So just heads up for that. The temperature in Princeton was recorded at various times during the day. The times and temperatures are shown in the table. Cool, so I see some negative times, a time of 0, and a positive time. I don't know about you, but I've never looked at a clock and seen times like this. We're gonna have to talk about that. I also see temperatures in degrees Celsius, okay? Number 1 says label axes and plot points that represent the data. So we're gonna do this together. The reason why is because we're gonna be drawing our first precise graph together, and it's a lot easier to check your work if your axes look exactly like mine. There's more than one correct way to do this, but we'll do it all the same way together today so that it's really easy to check our work, okay? A couple of things to point out. This part right here where it says time, hours before or after midnight, what do you think a negative time would mean? Do you think that would be before midnight or after midnight? You got it. That would be before midnight. Okay, so this -5 means 5 hours before midnight. Okay, what does -2 mean? -2 means 2 hours before midnight. What is 0? Tricky one. Did I trick you? 0 means midnight. 0 means absolutely. There's no hours before and no hours after midnight. And what about 8? This is a positive 8. You're already interpreting points on a coordinate plane. We haven't even drawn one yet. Excellent job. 8 means 8 hours after midnight. And of course, we talked about how I can have positive and negative degrees. So when we set up our coordinate plane, time is typically on the x-axis. It is almost always represented on the x-axis for reasons we're not going to get into today. So go ahead and find your notes, and we're going to set up a coordinate grid together. And I'm just going to label this question 1 so that it's really clear for your Google form what's going on, okay? Let's go ahead and draw, give yourself quite a bit of space for a vertical y-axis as well as a horizontal x-axis. When I'm setting this up, I've got to think, am I going to have data in all the quadrants? And yes, both the temperature and the time had negative and positive values. So I want to make sure I have all 4 quadrants represented. It is really helpful to use pencil here because as you're drawing a graph, this happens all the time, you might realize that actually you need to make your axis longer in order to accompany all your data, or shorter. So make sure that you're using a pencil. Okay. All right, let's label our axes. I said the x-axis almost always represents time. So I'm labeling my x right here, and then I'm going to say what it represents. This is time in hours I'm taking an abbreviation there, hours before or after midnight. Hours before or after midnight. Okay. And here we go. And my y variable, my other variable is the temperature. So the temperature changes based on the time, right? So my other variable is temperature in degrees Celsius. So I'm going to put y temp in degrees, capital C means Celsius. Okay. And now I'm going to look at my data really carefully. And I'm going to look at what interval or what scale I'm going to use on the x and on the y, okay? So on my x-axis, looks like my least value is -5, so I've got to make sure I get all the way to -5 on the x-axis. And my greatest value is 8, +8. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I have both of those on my x-axis. So I know I need to get to 8 here. So I wonder if I have 8 boxes, I'm not sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, I've got 8 boxes. I know you probably don't have graph paper, but I am going to go ahead and count by ones here, not by twos, not by tens, not by a half. I'm going to go ahead and count by ones. You do not need to label everything. I am going to label 8 just to show that I know I'm going all the way to my maximum value. If you need a little bit more room, go ahead and grab your eraser and extend your axis a little bit. And I am going to go out to my least value, -5. I had one more box, so I put another tick mark there. Pause the video if you need more time. All right, I also want to go ahead and set up my y-axis. Here are some decimal numbers, and I even have like a 0.7. It's not just 0.5. So I'm not going to count by tenths because I need to go all the way to almost -7 and all the way to under +2. So I'm going to go ahead and use on my y-axis, I think I'm going to count by a half every time, or 0.5 every time. So, and I might need to extend this down, I'm not sure yet. So I'm going to start with the negatives. I know I need to go all the way to -7. So I'm going to say this is -0.5 or 0.5, and here's my -1. Right? So 2 boxes for me is -1. If you have lined paper, you can decide that one line represents one whole and halfway through a line represents one half. You can do it that way too. So here's -1, -2, -3. Yeah, I'm going to have to extend my line down. That's okay. My y-axis got all the way down to -7, and I've given myself lots of room to fill in those decimals accurately. And I am going to go to +2 because I know I have a decimal value that falls between 1 and 2. Excellent. All right, so I think that we've done number 1 successfully together. So let's look at the next one. It says label axes. Yep. Oh, plot points. We haven't yet plotted points, but we're ready to do that. Go ahead and take 1 minute to plot these points on your coordinate grid. I'll give you a timer to get that done. Time starts now. Think carefully about that feedback from before about starting with your x coordinate. "15 seconds left. All right, so I'm out of time. If you need a little bit more time to finish plotting, go ahead and pause the video. Here's where my points are. So I just want you to check that they're in the right quadrant and approximately the correct location. So I've got 2 points up here in quadrant 2 because I have a negative x value and a positive y value. I use that midway point between 1 and 2 to help me figure out 1.2 is closer to 1 than it is to 1.5, and 1.6 is just above 1.5. Okay. Here is the point 0, negative 3.5. A common mistake is to put that over here. If you put that point over here, you mixed up your x and y. So maybe go back at the end and rewatch the beginning of the video and just remember that the first coordinate is your x value. And here's my last point. This is in quadrant 4 because I have a positive x value and a negative y value. Awesome. Let's answer some questions together. Okay. At 3 p.m., it was negative 2.5 degrees Celsius. Plot this point. What quadrant does it fall in? Please take 1 minute to do that now. Timer is started answering question 2. Sixth graders, I just realized I made a typo, and I just went back to check, and it was my typo. So this should say at 3 a.m. It was negative 2.5 degrees Celsius. Okay, this should say 3 a.m. So if you think 3 a.m., that's in the middle of the night. Is that before or after midnight? Okay. Go ahead and make that either your positive or negative x value, depending on what you thought. So 3 a.m., go ahead. All right. Sorry again about that typo. At 3 p.m., I'm sorry, I said it again. At 3 a.m., the time is 3 hours past or 3 hours after midnight, and my temperature is negative 2.5. So I am landing in quadrant 4. So here's your point. It should be plotted on your graph. That is in quadrant 4. Remember, we named quadrants with Roman numerals, so it's a capital I and a capital V. Okay, sometimes people extend this little line over. I'm not sure why they do that. Awesome. Let's go ahead and answer question 3 and 4. Okay, question 3 and 4, you have, whoops, that's weird. I'm gonna hide my video so you can see the whole table. You have 1 minute to answer question 3 and 4. Go ahead and begin. We are about halfway through our time. Go ahead and make sure you put units on your answers. If you're stuck, think about if 10 p.m. is before midnight or after midnight. All right. What was the temperature at 10 p.m.? 10 p.m. is before midnight. It is? Yeah, it is 2 hours before midnight. So I'm looking for -2 in my table or on my graph. I'm noticing that -2 is listed for me. I have the data. It was -1.6 degrees Celsius at 10 p.m. Number 4, what time was it when the temperature reached -6.7 degrees Celsius? I find that data here. It was 8 hours, and this is positive, so after midnight. 8 hours after midnight is 8 a.m., 8 in the morning. Okay, go ahead and pause the video now and answer question 2 and question 4 in the Google form below. Awesome. We are, so far what we've done is we've looked at time and temperature as a context on a coordinate plane. We're going to move on to a new kind of context now, and that is account balance. My money managers, I'm really excited to talk with you about account balance. Before we dive into reading this question, I want to tell you what an account balance means. When you open a bank account, it starts out with $0 in it. The account balance is the amount of money in the account at any given time. So maybe when you turn 18, will go to the bank, you'll open a bank account, and you will deposit $200 in the account. Deposit means put in $200 into the account. What would the balance be? Yeah, the balance would be 200, positive 200, because the amount of money in the account is $200. If you deposit more, your account balance goes up. If you withdraw or take out money, your account balance goes down. You've also heard of borrowing money. If you borrow money from a bank or you spend money on your credit card, that's like borrowing money, you can end up with a negative account balance if you owe money or you have borrowed money. Okay, so this lends itself really well to looking at data on a coordinate plane. The graph shows the balance in a bank account over a period of 14 days. The axis labeled B, represents the account balance in dollars. Do you see that here? Excellent. The axis labeled D represents the day, represents the? Absolutely. Put your finger on the point that represents the account balance on day 4. Awesome. You should have put your finger over this point. Here's day 4. The account balance was represented here. I'm not going to give it away. Okay. I want you to answer questions 1 through 4 on your own, and then we will come back together. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that. So you do not need to copy the graph on your paper. Just answering questions 1 through 4. Your 2 minutes starts now. We are just about halfway through our time. You should be about on question 3. All right, if you need a little bit of extra time, please take that now. I want to review the answers with you. The greatest amount of money that we saw on the graph was $375. That occurred on day 14. How did you know it was the greatest? Hopefully you were looking at, whoops, I keep trying to point to my paper. Hopefully you were looking at the y-axis, knowing that this is the account balance. I'm looking for the point that is the highest up on that axis. So it represents the highest balance. It's $375. That's because it looks halfway between $350 and $400. Okay. Number 2, estimate the least account balance. On which day did it occur? So least, I'm looking at the farthest down on my vertical number line. I see this point right here represents the least balance. What is the balance there? This one doesn't look halfway between. It looks closer to negative 100 than it does to negative 50, like by a lot. I estimated negative $90 was the account balance on day 11. Number 3, what does the point 6, negative 50 tell you about the account balance? Let's find that point. 6, negative 50. That tells me on day 6, the balance was negative $50. Okay. And number 4, the absolute value of negative 50 is asking us, do you remember absolute value? Distance from 0, distance from? Absolutely, is 50. The absolute value of negative 50 equals 50. That tells us 50 is the amount of money owed on day 6. This is new vocabulary for us. We've talked about it a little bit before in this unit, but not in the context of coordinate planes. So check for that word in your response. Okay, once you've got it, go ahead and give yourself a couple of underlines like I just did. Awesome. You guys, we crushed it today. We got some feedback on plotting coordinate points. We looked at time and temperature on a coordinate grid, and we also looked at account balance on a coordinate grid. So you guys are gonna be professional graph readers at this point in all 4 quadrants. Really excellent job. Here's your question of the day. Your question of the day is, what did a negative time represent in today's task? What did a negative time represent in today's task? Can you pause the video and answer that question now? Awesome. If you're stuck, make sure you go back to that part in the video and rewatch so you can remember what a negative time represents in the story. Okay. Just as a reminder, to do your independent practice today, make sure you're signing in with your VCP Google account. Please submit in the Google form, but also go back to Google Classroom and click submit when you're all done. That's it makes it a lot easier for us to know your work is ready to grade, and then you don't accidentally have some missing work when you actually completed work. So make sure to turn it in both places, okay? It is due at 10 p.m. tonight. Have a really excellent rest of your Monday, and I will see you guys back here